Good morning, everyone. I am Big Mac. I've been married to the brain for 35 years. I'm the subject of most of the books and the DVDs if you decide to buy them today. And there's plenty out there, and we have specials. So I'm going to leave you in Caroline's hands. I'm running the slideshow, so God bless all of you. And thank you again for inviting us today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So great to be back with you for the second service, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the great intros. And I'm in my wheelhouse. When I talk about the mind-brain-body connection, I get so excited because I have the privilege of reaching millions now, and the feedback that we get from people realizing that the mind is something that you can actually control, that you don't have to feel like you're just blown around and controlled by your brain. That is so nice to know. So what I'm going to share with you today is the science of what it means to capture thoughts, to bring thoughts into captivity, to renew your mind. I'm going to link the science in with scripture so that it orientates you and sort of grounds you. But science should be in the church. I always say this because science is the how-to. Science comes from the word skira, which means knowledge. God is the source of all knowledge. And therefore, when we learn and look at science, we are being incredibly spiritual. So there's been a lot of talk over the years in churches of, you mustn't think, you mustn't feel emotions, you must just be spiritual. Well, God, that's kind of an insult because you are thinking beings. You're thinking, feeling, choosing beings. You're brilliant, you're intelligent, you're meant to manage your emotions, you're meant to feel your emotions. Your emotions are part of they're basically part of your makeup. They're not something bad. They work with your behaviors. They work with your body. So in other words, what we're going to hear today are things that I believe will give you hope and also practical ways of understanding how to capture a thought. We're supposed to pray continuously. We're supposed to be renewing our mind all the time. We're supposed to be bringing all thoughts into captivity. So let's start by understanding what a thought is and what the brain is and what the mind is. So here's a brain, just to make sure that you're awake today. This is not supposed to be Halloween. It's supposed to be a brain in a skull. And you are not your brain. Your mind drives your brain. The mind is not the same as the brain. The brain and the mind are not the same thing. And I'm emphasizing that because the messaging that we currently get is that the mind and the brain are the same thing. They're not the same thing. If I was holding up a dead brain now, that dead brain would do nothing. You could stare at it all day. It would never produce the thoughts. It would never produce what you are doing as a human, which is sitting here, being alive, listening, whatever it is that you do in life. So how is it that I can stand here and talk to you and you can sit there and listen and process this? What is the difference between us and a dead person? The mind. The mind is this crucial aspect of our humanity. It is our aliveness, and it needs to get much more attention. Now, for thousands of years, we focused on the mind in the ancient texts, in philosophy. For the last 150 years, also we focused on the mind, but something happened in the last 40 odd years, 40 to 50 years. Where as we started learning more about the physical side and physics, our knowledge of physics changed, and our knowledge of the brain changed, and by the mid-90s we had brain technology and so on, an emphasis shifted in our world, and that emphasis shifted from you as a human with a mind and an ability to think and feel and choose and experience life in all of its challenges and beauty, etc. That mind part of us, that humanity part of us, that became subsumed into the physical nature of who you are. So it became what we call neuro-reductionistic. Everything became about brain. Your brain, this is your brain on the shoes that I wear. This is your brain on anxiety. This is your brain on, I made a little joke, you can laugh. Okay, because I had to grow part of my brain to be able to stand in these shoes. Your brain, we are told that your brain makes you do everything. So therefore, if you're battling with life, there's something wrong with your brain. There's something wrong with you. That's not correct. If you're battling with life, it's not because you have a problem in your brain. It is because there's a problem in your life. There's a huge difference. So the first slide I want to show you is that we've had a misunderstanding that has been put forth in the last 38, 40 years. And I've been in this field for that long. And I watched it. I was trained in the 80s where we were told that the brain couldn't change, which was also incorrect because the brain is always changing. And then we were told that, and at that point, the mind was very important and was seen as separate. By the mid-90s, the mind had been kind of just thrown away and everything was brain, brain, brain. And yes, it's wonderful that we've learned about the brain. I'm a brain scientist. We've learned about the brain, but that doesn't preclude the mind because the brain does nothing without the mind. So the mind is your driving force. So basically changes, we've been told the current messaging, which is incorrect, is that changes in brain structure, things like inflammation in the brain and the body, changes and damaged genes, so genetic expression, that's not what it should be, damaged DNA, the pituitary thalamic axis, which is your stress axis, are often seen to be the cause of depression and anxiety, or the cause of mental illness, when actually they are the result of chronic unmanaged stress. Now, this is really important that you get this, because if your brain caused problems, that means you wouldn't need a mind because your brain's just driving everything. But your brain is disintegrating the minute that you die. Your mind leaves your body, you weigh about 2 pounds less, and your brain starts disintegrating, and so does your body. So the thing that's keeping your brain and body working is your mind. And the effectiveness of how you manage your mind is going to determine the health of your brain and your body. And that is called the spirit-soul-body connection, or in science it's called psychoneurobiology. I am a psychoneurobiologist studying that connection and how we can drive that process. So if you look at the next slide, the biomedical model, which is where we look just at brain, brain, brain and forget all about the mind and you being a human and having experiences, has produced what we call a 56-year obsession, trying to compare normal brains to brains of those diagnosed with mental illness. However, there is no normal brain. We're all crazy. And our brains keep changing. So a study came out of Yale, and this is one of a large body of research that said that we have to stop saying this is a schizophrenic brain, this is a depressed brain, this is an ADHD brain. It's completely scientifically incorrect. It's very damaging to your identity as a person. It's labeling and locking people in, and it's not correct because the brain never changes. It never stops changing. The technology I use is QEEG, and the reason that, and I'm not that I'm anti the other technology, if you read it correctly, it's all giving us good information. But your brain, you operate at millions of operations, in fact, billions per second. So I try and use technology that looks at what's happening in your brain as a result of you being alive, experiencing life in all of your millions of operations per second. So in other words, I look at the impact of life on your brain and body and how that shows up in how you connect with the world, your work, your relationships, you as a person, managing stress, etc. There's a very established link in the scientific literature and also in your gut instinct that chronic unmanaged stress will make you feel worse. We all know that. If you don't manage the stresses in your life, and stress, by the way, is actually good for you until it becomes unmanaged, then it becomes bad for you. But you know that if you don't manage, if you're just in a constant ongoing state of rushing from one thing to the next and not processing stuff and suppressing things and, using pass the buck prayer, I'll say a prayer and boom, it's got to be fixed, but not really doing anything, or using a scripture as a magic potion and God as a genie, okay? And thinking, why am I still battling with depression? Oh, the devil's attacking me. There's all of those are going outside and putting the blame on something else. And meanwhile, I'm not saying put the blame on yourself. I'm saying look at yourself. Look at what you're going through and give yourself permission to be a mess, because God is a loving, kind God. And the more gentle and kind you are to yourself and realize that you're showing up in life like you are because of something going on, or a whole bunch of things going on, the more compassionate you'll be with yourself, the more in line with godliness you'll be, because God is compassion and love. And the quicker you'll start processing through that stuff. We have to go through our stuff in order to be able to move forward. We have got to stop living these quick fix band-aid lives. I feel bad, I feel depressed, oh, I've got something wrong with me, I've got clinical depression, I need to go to the doctor, I need to get a medication, I need to stop these emotions. Why on earth would you want to stop something that is so much part of your humanity? You need to go through the ups and downs. You need to experience the sadness and the happiness and the depression and the frustration and the anxiety and the guilt and the shame. It's all part of your humanity. It's all part of you growing. You have to make a mess in order to repair and grow. You're not an avatar. You're not a robot. You are a brilliant, messy human being. And it's okay to be messy. That's why I called my podcast Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, and why it's one of the most popular globally. We're always in the top 10. Why? Because I say, hey, it's okay to be a mess. It really is okay to be a mess. Your whole structure of your mind-brain-body connection is designed for you to be messy because of free will. You're going to make the wrong choices. And that is okay. You're going to be reactive. You're going to get irritated. You're going to have some really bad experiences. It's going to freak you out. You're going to plug into your phones too much. You're going to go and live a hustle culture and get agitated depression. It's going to happen. It's happening. Am I right? The point is that what are you doing about it? Because you can handle it for a point, but you can't keep living like that. Because what we see is if you keep living like that, you'll damage your brain and your body and your mind and your mental health and your peace and all the rest of it. Okay? And then you're not going to be showing up and doing what only you can do. And the world needs you because you can do something that no one else can do. You bring something to the table that we need. We are all pieces of a puzzle. You've heard that concept before. It's not about competition, it's about enhancement. The more you lift others up, the more you increase your own mind, brain, body health, and the more intelligent you become. The more you try and compete and beat others and get threatened by everyone and get jealous, etc., the more you damage yourself. But if you're not developing your identity and understanding how to manage your mind, you're going to be a mess. And where your mind goes, your brain and body follow. So this is some of the research that I've done. So let me show you some science. Let me show you what this looks like. I'm going to show you something called a telomere. You're going to see a slide called a telomere. You're going to see a slide with a telomere on it. So that thing that's crossed, that blue thing, those are your chromosomes. If anyone here is in the medical profession, please excuse the simple explanations. I'm just going to make this super simple. So the little blue thing is a chromosome. The chromosome unwinds into your DNA. Your DNA is where your genes are. Your genes are, you have short, medium, and long-term genes. Those genes are basically a set of instructions that your mind reads and that enables you to then make cells and everything inside the cell. And the cells group together to make your body, your organs and your systems and your body. And they are constantly changing. From the moment of conception, your cells are dividing, driven by your aliveness, which is your mind, the spirit soul part of you, and your cells never stop changing. And you are right at the moment, every second of every day, ladies and gentlemen, you are making somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million cells. And those make your body. Now, here's the key. If you don't capture thoughts and renew your mind, which I call mind management, you are going to be damaging your cells. Let's have a look what that looks like. So this telomere, the telomeres are the little gold caps on the ends of that blue there. They're not really gold and it's not really blue. It's just for the image so you can see it. So a telomere is like a little cap on the ends of a chromosome. And it's really important in cell division. It works with all the proteins and there's a whole lot of biochemistry involved. All you have to understand is that those are phenomenal structures because they help your cell to keep replicating. They're part of a whole process. When we don't manage our mind and we don't manage our lifestyle, we don't manage chronic stress, and we eat badly, and you don't do enough exercise, and we do a ton of exercise, but we don't manage our mind, so the exercise is not really working anyway. And all of that will shorten the telomeres. This is just one of millions of things that can go wrong in our body, which over time accumulate. So when the telomeres shorten, then we have the cells that we make every second, which are making up our body, so we keep replacing our brain and our body, are weaker. And over time, they get weaker and weaker. Now, shorter telomeres equals weaker cells equals physical health that's compromised. And when your physical health is compromised, your biological age changes. So the age of your organs changes. and you become very vulnerable to disease. What the research shows, and mine included, is that you have an increased vulnerability to disease by 35 to 98% if you don't manage your mind. Now, it's not only telomeres that get affected. I'm just showing you a couple of examples of some of the physical effects when we don't manage our spirit and our soul. Well, when we don't manage our soul and tune into our spirit. Okay? So you as a human, as we know, is spirit, soul, body. And your spirit is the deepest part of you. Scientifically, we call the spirit the non-conscious, N-O-N, non-conscious, not unconscious. Unconscious is when you're asleep, knocked out, or under anesthetic. That's unconscious. Non-conscious is the most intelligent part of you. It is massive. It operates at 10 to the 27, which is faster than 400 billion actions per second. It is your driving force. It is your aliveness. It is your spiritual level. It operates in the present, past, and future, and it never stops. So even when you die, that spiritual part of you continues. It is plugged into the source of wisdom, which is God. So whether you believe in God or not, or whatever you believe, is you are still, as a human, the reason you're breathing is because you plugged into wisdom. And that's the spirit of life that is in you and flowing through you. So the spirit of God is connected to your wisdom. At your core, you are wisdom. How can I say that? Wired for love. How can I say that? Well, simple. You're made in God's image. So therefore, your core is one of wisdom. You have, on top of that, free will, and that's the messiness. So there's a wisdom core, there's a messiness. I call them the messy mind and the wise mind. So the wise mind is the one that's super tuned into the Spirit of God. So when you talk about being led by the Spirit of God and renewing your mind and capturing thoughts and all that stuff we're supposed to do, there's a science of how to do it. So therefore, essentially what we need to do as humans is tune in to this deep spiritual level. The more we tune into our deep spiritual level, the more we tune into the Spirit of God, and the more we're going to have wisdom operating in our life. And when I say tune in, it means you need to listen to your thoughts, because your thoughts are the things that drive everything that you feel, everything you say, everything you do, everything that you feel in your body, and your perspective on life. Those are what we call warning signals. Okay, so if you fill with peace and joy and you're flourishing, and like when I talk about this stuff, I just glow. Literally, my brain could glow; it would be glowing. Because I am in my sweet spot. So and I'm enhancing. So as I go through this process of teaching you this stuff or doing the research or whatever, it is enhancing my mind, brain, body health. I'm tuning into the wisdom that is in me. I'm tuning into the wisdom of God, and I'm being led by that wisdom. And when I apply this principle in my day-to-day life, I can actually train my mind to tune in the same way and get into the same kind of level. So in other words, what I'm saying is that you can train yourself to bring every single thought, and you think about 25,000 thoughts a day, into captivity to Christ Jesus. In other words, into captivity to love. So you can measure it against that standard. When you do that, and that basically translates into every 10 seconds you should be talking to God, which means pray. Isn't talking to God pray? Okay, so we're supposed to pray continuously, so all I'm giving you is the science of how to do it. Okay, so I initially developed a system called the Neuro Cycle. I have an app, I have books, I have all kinds of things on it, which is the system that was based on a theory that was developed for how do I help my patients who've had brain damage, who's suffering from autism, stroke, dementias, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is damage from sports head, repeated concussions, that sort of thing, extreme trauma, emotional trauma, etc., abuse. How can I help them capture the thought by tuning into the signals of anxiety, emotions, all those things, the way your body's functioning? How can I help a person to tune in to how they are showing up, track that back to the source, which is the thought, and then deconstruct and reconstruct the thought? Because capturing a thought means you've got to do something with it, which is renewing the mind. Renewing the mind means, well, that's happened to me, but what can I do about it? How can I think differently? How can I grow and repair and grow from the situation? I think we all agree on that concept. It's reconceptualizing the situation. Your story always happens to you. I mean, your stories happen to you. You can't change your story, but you can change how they look in your life. Okay, so when we learn to listen to the wisdom that is in the depths of us, when we learn to do with our conscious mind, which is only awake when you're awake, which is actually, it's also pretty slow, but it has what we call a veto power, the ability to override something toxic or negative or not override it or submit to it. In other words, you can make choices. When you train your conscious awareness, your conscious mind, what you're consciously aware of right now in this moment, if you train your conscious mind to tune into the depths of your spiritual, non-conscious mind, you can then go even deeper and train yourself to listen to the wisdom of God, and you can pull that wisdom into your life. How? What are those signals? How does the Spirit of God speak to us through wisdom? Through signals sent from the depths of wisdom, through our spiritual level, the non-conscious, through the subconscious, which is like a bridge into the conscious. And we experience that through our emotions, how we feel, how our body feels, how our what we're saying and doing, our perspective. And when you focus on those, it'll be attached to a thought. So therefore, our thoughts come up with all these things attached, feelings and all that stuff that I've been saying. So a thought is a real thing. It looks like a tree. And like a tree, this is a healthy one and this is a toxic one. And like a tree has roots and branches, a thought has root memories and branch memories. So one thought is a concept made of lots of details, which are the memories. So an experience is a thought, and the detail of the experiences are the memories. And so that the thoughts and the memory, the memories inside the thoughts produce what you say, what you do, what you feel, your body sensations, and your perspective. Are you kind of getting this? Okay, so every experience we have is built into the brain by the mind, and those then drive us. They become our drivers. So these are our drivers. So this is a good one. It's healthy. But if this is driving you, it's probably driving you crazy. And it could be whatever, depending on the extreme, depending on how long and how big the trauma, or how big and strong and how much time you spent on the toxic habit or pattern in your life, whatever, that will determine the impact that has on you. So this wisdom of God scans it activates your spirit, your non-conscious, to scan the stores of your mind to find the thoughts like this, to make you aware of them, and then it scans the thoughts like this to make you aware of them. These you want to grow bigger because it brings mind, brain, body health. These you want to deconstruct and reconstruct. That process is mind management, and that is capturing thoughts and renewing the mind. So you tune into these when the Spirit of God scans, activate your spirit to scan. Your spirit with the Spirit of God does is it finds these that are the most disruptive, because we've all got plenty of these. It finds the ones that are the most disruptive currently, that are patterns in your life, and pops them up through the subconscious into your conscious mind as an intrusive thought. And that intrusive thought has attached to it, so imagine things shooting out of here, emotions, what you say and do, your bodily sensations, and your perspective. Okay, you're getting the pattern? Okay, so if you ignore that, so in other words, the intrusive thought is actually your best friend. And everyone has intrusive thoughts, but some of us have got so good at shoving them back down. So if you don't process this by deconstructing and reconstructing, it gets stronger, goes back even stronger, and now drives you even more crazy. And that cycle is chronic unmanaged stress. And sometimes we have a very big trauma, and initially we do suppress for pure protection. But at some point, we have to deal with it because they will explode like volcanoes in our life. So this is why we see very often people that have had extreme childhood trauma, that hadn't had the opportunity to process it, that just got medicated and labeled. You'll see very often in their early 20s and 30s having very big psychotic breaks and being told that they have schizophrenia as a disease. Now, schizophrenia is not a disease. It is an extreme mental breakdown from extreme, unmanaged, extreme trauma. But even that extreme state, we can help a person. In that state, definitely more support is needed, obviously. But even that person who's in that most extreme psychotic, catatonic, hearing voices, whatever it is, they can basically deconstruct, reconstruct, and find peace and normality again. Okay, and that's important to tell you that, because we do live in a very biomedical, neuroreductionistic world where we're told that anxiety and depression is an illness, and things like clinical depression, clinical anxiety, schizophrenia are diseases of the brain and diseases of hereditary that they pass through the family, and that they are disruptions in the chemicals, and none of that is scientific. Okay, it is science that has been biased and incorrectly presented. It has been disproved over and over again, but it is a great way of marketing pharmaceuticals, unfortunately, and also a very simplistic explanation to help people to understand their pain. But actually, it's a very bad way, because if you are feeling extreme depression or anxiety or whatever, and you go to someone and 15 minutes later they just give you a label and a medication, you don't actually feel, you may feel better temporarily because there's a temporary reduction in intensity of your feelings, but it hasn't solved the issue. It hasn't got to the underlying core of the issue. Your story hasn't been heard. We are designed as humans to talk through our stuff, to listen to each other. Think of Jesus in the garden. This is the model of mental health. You get in the garden. Jesus got in the garden to face a big issue. Only Jesus could face, only you can face your issues. And then Jesus went through a time period of processing, screaming out to God and saying, I can't do this. You are allowed to scream out. You're allowed to be depressed. You're allowed to be anxious. You're allowed to freak out in the love zone. The garden is the love zone. You can say all the things that are on your chest, because when you get them out, that is when you can get them under control. Research shows that awareness reduces enables you to actually deconstruct these things that are made of proteins and that are real structures inside of your brain. So let me bring this back to the telomeres, and then I'm going to show you some brain slides, and I'll kind of tie this all up together. So coming back to the telomeres, if I don't get in the garden and manage my stress and turn to the support in my life. Jesus turned to the disciples and didn't say, hey, give me Prozac, give me opioids, get me out of here, swap places, whatever. Jesus simply, and I'm not being facetious, I'm just being realistic. Jesus turned to the disciples and said, can you but be with me? So what are we supposed to be for each other? Can you be with someone? Can you sit with someone and not say, okay, let me pray for you? Pass the buck prayer. Now you've done it. What's wrong with them? I've prayed for them. Why aren't they memorizing their Bible yet? All this judgment that goes on. Do you know how many emails and direct messages we get from people saying, I love Jesus, but I'm a big sinner because I'm still depressed? No, you are not. Depression is normal. It is a gift from God, because it is telling you, pay attention. It is the Holy Spirit shaking you by the shoulders in a loving way, saying, there's something going on. This is not who you are. There's a because of in your life, and you need to pay attention. You need to capture, you need to renew, and that's why I developed the Neuro Cycle, because that helps you to capture and renew and train yourself to do this all the time. And the Neuro Cycle is the system in the book and in the app, okay? So you can go learn how to do it there. I've got podcasts explaining this as well. Let me use this time to share the science and to motivate you to do this, and for you to understand how brilliant you are. So when you do this, when you decide to get in the garden and do a Neuro Cycle, which is face your stuff, which is go through what happened. I'm showing, these are my emotions. What are the details in the thought? How am I seeing myself? How did I process this? Where did this come from? What is the source? What is the origin story? Okay, this has happened. Now what can I do about it? As you go through that process, which is a 5-step process that you do daily for 15 to 45 minutes, as you do that, you are moving through the garden. It doesn't happen in 1 day, 1 minute, 1 hour. It happens in cycles of 63 days. We have seen from the research that it takes time to run the race. And the race is in cycles of 63 days. If you want change in your life, you're going to have to commit to changing in these cycles. So I've done the science. How long does it take to rewire the mind-brain-body connection so that you change your behaviors, that you get that sense of peace, that you can learn to forgive, that you can release and move forward in your life and not stay a victim and become bitter and addicted. Addiction is not a disease. Addiction is simply too hard to face this, so you're trying to numb the pain. It's not a disease. Once we see that people that are in addiction will get out of addiction, 86 to 94% of people will get out of even the most severe addictions through choice to actually do the work of facing the pain and processing through it. Getting in the garden, it gets worse before it gets better. Jesus got beaten up, beaten to shreds, full of hardly any skin left on his bones, and then crucified. That is bad stuff. It got worse and worse and worse and worse. But then Jesus did rise with the wounds in his hand. You will rise. Your story will always be with you, but you will rise again. This too shall pass. And we got it, but that requires us to get in the garden. When you get in the garden, guess what happens to your telomeres, amongst a few other things? You're finally getting back to the telomeres, and I'm going to tell you some brainwave stuff, and we'll wrap up with that, just to see how amazing. Now, Jesus sweated blood in the garden. So what we have there is a clear indication of the mind-brain-body link. When you're under chronic stress and you're dealing with stuff, you will experience changes in your body. But when you're processing, what we see is when someone suppresses, the telomeres shorten. When the telomeres shorten, the cells get weaker. When your cells get weaker, you will battle more with mental and physical illnesses. But when you are crying out to God and screaming and processing and doing whatever it is that you're doing in the processing phase, even getting worse depression, your telomeres will get longer. And when your telomeres get longer, you will have healthier cells. And when you have healthier cells, you'll have a healthier body, and that feeds back in your brain and you function differently. Let's look at an image of inside your brain. Quickly, before we do that, Matt, you can bring up the head map. Okay, so I'm going to show you now what, from the technology I use, we're looking inside the brain, and we're looking at something called a head map. So this is a computer-generated readout of someone's millions of actions per second at certain time points. And so you're looking at the ears on the side and the nose at the top, so that's the top of the head, and we put all these electrodes onto the brain, the skull, and we can look at what's going on. So it's not looking at the cause, it's looking at the result, remember? The cause is in our environment. Our mind processes the environment and puts it into the brain, okay? And we see the result. Okay, so what we're looking at here on the top row is day 1 of a clinical trial that I did. One of my recent clinical trials. It's in this book. This particular slide and image is in the book. Oh, you can see it up there anyway. Okay, so what we're looking at here is this clinical trial ran over 63 days because I wanted to know if I'm renewing my mind and capturing thoughts, how long can it take for change to happen? Now, we all hear it takes 21 days to build a habit. No, it doesn't. It takes at least 63. Okay? And if you stop at day 21, you're going to get very stuck and very frustrated. But major things happen at each of the phases. So the trial ran there's day 1 when they came into clinic, day 21, and day 63, and then also 6 months later. Okay, so what we're looking at here is this particular person. This is a case study of one of the people in the trial. It was a random controlled trial, which means that people were randomly assigned to control and experimental, which means some people got the Neuro Cycle and some people didn't, but they didn't know who it was. And also as a researcher, double blind, I didn't know, nor did my research team until once the results were in, so that we couldn't bias the results. So I'm telling you unbiased information, okay? So day 1, what we do in the clinic is and this is how I ran my practice too, we would look at the most important thing is not what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you. In other words, your narrative. What is your story? And then we look at psychological measures, standard ones. I have developed one as well that has been validated, whatever. It looks at how you manage your mind. And then we also look at blood biomarkers, because your blood and body are going to respond to how your mind is using your brain and your body. And we looked at things like cortisol, DHEA, various different biomarkers. We looked at telomeres, and we also looked inside the brain at the response. So when I talk about biomarkers and brain responses, I'm not talking about causes. I'm not saying that that's a depressed brain. I am saying that this is the result, this is the impact on the brain and the body when we are going through stuff, when it's unmanaged. At day 1, this particular subject was in an unmanaged chronic stress state. In mid-30s, biological age from looking at the telomeres was of a sickly 65-year-old. But this person is actually only in their mid-30s. So at day 1, chronic unmanaged stress, narrative of I am depression, I can't do anything, I can't sleep, my life's a mess, suicidal. That's just a broad overview. Day 1 of the trial, their body is 35, more or less, years older than what their actual age is, and a sickly body. So you can imagine if you're in your 30s and your body's 30 years older than your age, you're not going to be feeling great. Their brain was inflamed, their body was, the cortisol levels were off the charts, etc. That person at the end of they were in the clinic and getting all these tests and things done. They then got the app loaded on their phone. They didn't get therapy from me, and I'm saying this to say that you are with yourself 24/7. You can't be with a therapist, coach, counselor, pastor 24/7, best friend. You wake up with yourself. You've got to manage your own minds. This is what God is teaching us to do, is we've got to manage our own stuff. You've got to get in the garden and manage your stuff. You need the support. Okay, so we do need the friends, the loved ones, the coaches, the counselors, etc. But you need to live with yourself. You go to them once you get the support as you are managing your own mind, and you need maybe different perspectives or just a little bit more insight or just that love. Because when you love someone, when someone just loves you through or hugs you or just is there for you, that boosts your healing by massive amounts. In fact, when you're in a bad place and you're really battling and you reach out to help someone else, you'll boost your own healing by a factor of 60+%. So you want to give yourself a quick boost when you're feeling down? Text someone, take them out for coffee, go listen to their story. Don't talk about yourself, listen to them. You will boost yourself and you'll feel so much better afterwards. Doesn't mean you can't talk about yourself, but maybe kickstart by letting them talk first. Okay, so coming back to this person at day 1. Now, chronological, biological. Chronological, I'm 58. That's my chronological age. My biological age is 48. So it's 10 years younger, and because I'm managing my mind. And I know that the days when I don't manage my mind, I feel the difference because I'm so trained to do this continuously. So you can learn to do this. Sure, I've developed a system, but there's millions around the world that are using this now that are giving me the same feedback. Okay, so this particular subject, by day 63 of using the app daily, by day 21, that's the second row, we see, okay, sorry, let me go back to why it's blue, okay? Day 1, blue, that means very low energy in the brain. That means the brain waves, like the waves of a sea, where you get big ones and small ones and whatever, we have these waves in the brain that are the electrical activity, the electromagnetic activity that's happening in the brain because you're alive. In other words, that's your mind in your brain, okay? We wanted a certain level and a certain combinations, exactly like the waves in the sea. We want big waves, you want waves that are breaking, we want little waves on the beach, we want a cyclic process in the brain, and you want the different sides of the brain to work together. You don't want too much of one or too little of one. So this particular person, they had very, very, very low energy. So for example, they felt very physically ill. They did not feel good at all. Their theta wave, which is the first one that you see up there, that theta wave was high. So that, in other words, that meant that their brain had low energy. And when you've got low energy, you feel awful physically. They couldn't sleep, etc., etc. By day 21 of just doing the app on their own daily, this is a person who's had years of therapy, okay? They came back and the brain waves were now of a grayish color. This is a flat image, but when we see it on the screen, it's like alive. And that grayness shows that there's a much better energy level in the brain. The different parts of the brain are working together. The brain is able to actually listen to the mind. So the mind is able to activate parts of the brain, like, for example, the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that you want to pull your memories through. It's kind of like a doorway where our memories from the non-conscious move through into the conscious mind. So what we saw in day 1 was that thing wasn't working. By day 21, it was working really well. So what had happened at day 21 is this person's brain energy had stabilized, their telomeres were getting longer, their DHEA, cortisol, homocysteine, all that was happening, was improving. Their narrative at day 21 was fascinating. Was what they said was, I am not depression. Day 1, they said they're depression. You can't be depression because depression's not an it. Depression is an emotion. But that's how their identity had been subsumed. They had lost their identity. When people want to commit suicide, they've lost their will to live. They've lost their identity, their value. This person had lost all of that by being labeled constantly and by suppressing for years. By day 21, the lid had come off and this person saw what they had been suppressing for years. They had gone through extreme childhood trauma and they had been pushing the lid on that for years, and eventually it exploded volcanic mode in their life and in their 30s. So the chronic stress over years, chronic unmanaged stress, had aged that person biologically to 35 years older than what they actually were. Their brain energy was very low. So all of that accounts for this lack of being able to sleep and all the things that they were saying. By day 21, they were saying, they would say their story had changed. I am not depression. I am depressed because of extreme childhood trauma. And they said, I'm even more depressed, and I'm more anxious, and I'm having panic attacks, and I'm frustrated, and a bunch of other stuff because I am grieving the past. That's what the person said. So in other words, the lid had come off through the Neuro Cycle. They'd got in the garden. They had started seeing the root origin story for how they had interpreted themselves. This was being revealed. The soil was being thrown off the roots. That's what the work of the Neuro Cycle does. That's what capturing thoughts and renewing your mind does, is it deconstructs so that you can reconstruct your life. It looks at the mess to repair the mess. So they were grieving their loss of their childhood, the loss of childhood innocence. So they should be more depressed. That is a very normal response. Guys, people have increased their depression levels and anxiety have shot through the roof over COVID, and that's totally normal. That's not a pandemic in mental health. It doesn't mean we need more labeling and more drugging. Please, God, no. That is the worst way to handle this. What we need is more people sitting and doing what Jesus said to the disciples. Can you listen to me? Can I share my story? Can we come together as a community in a church and help each other? Those that need money, finance, support, love, homes. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's how we grow our telomeres. That's how we basically change how we function as a humanity. Not more labels and drugs. Our kids are the most drugged and labeled generation. I have a book coming out next year, my 19th book, that is to help parents and caregivers help their children with their mental health. My youngest patient was a 2-year-old. And 2-year-olds, you can teach, my 4 kids have all been trained in this stuff. You can teach a 2-year-old how to manage their mind. So if you can teach a 2-year-old, you can certainly learn how to do this as an adult. So in other words, what we saw happening with this particular subject was a treatment effect. What we saw when she said she's more depressed, that's what Jesus experienced in the garden. Things got worse before they get better. We see that this person, even though they were biologically feeling quite good, they were feeling terrible at the beginning, it felt even worse physically as they were dealing with the depression, but they said it's different because they were grieving. They said it's different. This feeling in my body, I know where it comes from. I know it's linked to the grieving. That is normal. We have to allow that. Then they go through, by day 63, this person came back into the trial, all the same, third part of the trial, all the tests done. Long story short, they just said, I am no longer scared of the depression. I'm now understanding this particular issue that's happened in my life, plus all the other ones that this has brought up. And I now have a plan of action. I understand that for the rest of my life, blah, 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 blah. I've had some patients that as they face things like this, incredible severe trauma, they've had to do multiple cycles over maybe 2 years. I've had some patients that as the trauma is being revealed, this is extreme trauma. I'm not talking about sort of the day-to-day bad patterns that we develop because of just toxic habits. Those are much easier to fix. Those generally will get fixed in one cycle. But when it's heavy stuff and big stuff, it can take you years. You can land up being stuck in bed for weeks and as you go through this grieving process of what happened to you. You need to give yourself permission to do that. There's nothing wrong with you. Okay, so there's so much more I can say, but what I'm going to end off saying is I want to show you another brain slide, and this is of one of the subjects in the control group, and we're going to see it now, and you'll see a slightly different pattern. Okay, it's going to come up, and essentially this person this is one of the people in the control group that they, at day 1, now it's all different colors, but just look at the red. Okay, this particular person was actually very insightful on day 1. Their insight into their problems was fantastic. They could tell you, the narrative was when I read all the narratives, because everything was recorded, it was amazing. They knew why they were showing up. They knew their signals. They could explain it. They had tremendous insight. They knew what they should do. They knew where they should be going, but they were very frustrated because they said, I know this, I've got awareness, but what next? So then they didn't get the app because they were in the control group, but they didn't know that because none of them knew what the treatment was. That's what this kind of trial does. So you can get unbiased results. By day 21, they were actually feeling way better. So if you have a look, the red has almost gone on the last 2 the head maps. So that means that their anxiety levels, their feeling of, I'm so anxious because I know what I need to fix, but I don't know how to fix it, had started changing because from all the interaction they had from the trial with the tests and the questions and the whatever had made them feel like, you know what, I'm getting the support. There's this, what they experienced at day 21 was what we experience when we get support. There's changes. You feel like you can cope. You feel like, hey, this is the problem. This is where I want to be, but I've got the support. But by day 60, there was a 42-day gap between them seeing anyone and the next time they came into the clinic. So when they came in the next time, they were still, the excitement had gone away. It was now 6 weeks that they had to, oh, now what do I do? They didn't have a mind management plan. They didn't know how to capture and deconstruct their thoughts. So basically they got worse. And now look at the red, how much red there is there. When we do not want to see, that means very, very, very tsunamis in the brain. Not nice waves, tsunamis. And there was a lot of pain in the body, inflammation, blah, 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 all kinds of things going wrong, telomeres shortening, etc. Obviously, at this point, we gave them the app, and they used the app, and within a few weeks, they had started resolving the issue. My point, you have to train yourself. It's not even well, I can't tell you that. Let me rephrase that sentence. I strongly suggest, that you follow what the scriptures say, which is bring all thoughts into captivity and renew your mind as a lifestyle. We talk about worship and prayer, and we get so holy in church, and we pray for people, and there's nothing wrong. You can do all of that. But if that is irrelevant, if you're not managing your every moment, those are just kind of showcasing. The real thing is, what are you doing with your every single moment? What are you doing every 10 seconds? Are you so tuned in that as you, for example, I'll give you an example. I snapped at my husband yesterday because we went out to go and get lunch, and I was hungry, and there was a queue, and it irritated me. And I was irritated, and it was unreasonable, and I snapped, I'm not going to stand in this queue. Now, it wasn't his fault that there was a line at the restaurant, and that I had a lot of work to do, but I snapped it immediately. That's such a stupid example, but immediately I knew the warning signals. I could read the emotions. I'm tuned in, and I know that that's going to shorten my telomeres. I know it's going to affect my relationship, and also it's just unkind and unfair. So I captured that, and immediately, within, honestly, under 60 seconds, I could apologize, recognize, fix the situation, resolve it, etc. But that's such a small thing. How easy is it to get into patterns of being irritated and staying irritated and growing and not managing these things? And on top of the stuff in our life that we haven't dealt with in the past, all of it accumulates. And the more you think about something, the more it grows. You can get yourself into bad habits. I have trained myself, and so has Matt. We've been married for 35 years, and we've trained our kids, and we practice this as a lifestyle. We get irritated, we recognize that, but we catch it quickly. It doesn't stay as a pervasive atmosphere in our house. We apologize quickly, we deal with it, we fix, and we don't just put a Band-Aid, we resolve it. Why am I constantly getting irritated about X, for example, if there's a pattern? Why is this happening in our relationship? Whatever. So the point I'm making is that you can train yourself, where you can catch the little things before they become big, and you can find the patterns that generally come from something that's big, that's unresolved. That's your mind. All of that's mind work, and that's what we need to capture, because all of those will block your physical and mental health, which will block the thing that you can do that no one else can do. You cannot control your story, but you can control what it looks like inside of you and how it plays out into your future. So go and catch those thoughts every moment of every day. Thank you.